for joining us this afternoon. And thank you to all those that are watching on all the different social outlets from the Mets channels as well as SNY's. With today's announcement, I'd like to begin by introducing Mets President Sandy Alderson to share some words.
Thanks, Harold. Thanks, everybody, for being on board this afternoon. We're really happy to have James. James fills a big need for us behind the plate. Everyone knows that we were deficient there last year and thinner there than we were during the season, during this off season. So James is a real plus for us. Like James for a lot of reasons. First of all, we enjoyed our Zoom conversation with him from his home near Nashville. But more importantly, from an offensive standpoint, from a defensive standpoint, from the standpoint of working with our pitchers and motivating our pitchers, we think he's a great fit for us. James, a right-handed hitter, we're awfully left-handed. James gives us a real threat from the right side. And from a defensive standpoint, significant improvement over the last couple of years, and really due to James' commitment to being better. And that was one of the key motivators for us. And I think also just his relationship with pitchers and the ability to help develop our staff. Obviously, we've got some excellent pitchers with DeGrom and Stroman, but at the same time, we may end up with some younger guys who are going to need the good counsel of a veteran catcher. So really happy to have James with us. Looking forward to it. Brings a great ethic to his work and to his performance, and very glad he's a Met.
Thank you, Sandy. Jared, if I can call upon you to share some additional thoughts.
Yeah, just to echo Sandy's words, want to welcome James and his wife Jessica to New York. Really excited to add a catcher who impacts the game on both sides of the baseball, and like Sandy mentioned, who really, we also expect to impact the culture in a positive way, both on the field and in the clubhouse.
Thank you, Jared. James, with that, we'll turn it over to you. I know you had some opening remarks you wanted to share.
Yeah, the first thing I'd like to say is just thank you to the entire Mets organization, Sandy and Jared and everyone else that was involved in the process. I couldn't be more excited to be a New York Met, and my family shares that sentiment. I'm very blessed to my wife, my kids, my parents, really everyone from top to bottom. Couldn't be more excited to start, and I look forward to the next 4 years as a New York Met, and see how many championships we can get during that time frame. So.
Thank you, James. With that, Ethan, I'll turn it over to you. We'll carry us through the Q&A, please.
James, your first question comes from Steve Gelbs from SNY.
Hey, James, congratulations. Sandy mentioned your leadership ability to inspire the pitchers. That seems to be something that is one of the first things brought up by many people who know you, who have been on the same team with you. What do you view as your role in that regard in terms of working with and enhancing the pitching staffs that you're a part of?
Well, I think the first thing to know about me is I'm going to always pride my game on my defense. I've always felt that way because I truly believe that the catcher can impact the game tenfold defensively than he can offensively, especially over the course of the season. And I think that, especially in a day and age where everything is measured through a metric, through analytics, there's one thing that we haven't as a baseball community come up with is a value for the relationship between a catcher and a pitcher. And there's a lot of things that go into that. I think the first thing is trust. And the only way you gain that trust is by getting to know somebody. But having that trust between a pitcher and catcher, I think is the most important thing. And from there, you learn how what makes guys tick. And I think that's one of my strengths is I do everything I can to get to know somebody and figure out what makes them tick. So when things are going tough, in the biggest moment of the game, what's going to make that guy have the best chance for success? And I think anytime you have a catcher that can figure those things out about his pitchers and get them to that point, it's going to get them to the next level, which in turn is going to make the team a whole heck of a lot better.
You say you pride yourself more than anything on your defense and that relationship. I know last year, specifically when it came to framing, your numbers jumped way up from the year before. What type of work did you do? What specifically do you feel like you improved upon in that regard?
Well, the biggest thing I did is I sought outside help. With by the previous years of my career, I had never had a specific catching coach or anybody for that matter that was able to sit down and explain to me how the framing metrics worked, how those numbers came about, how just how everything created a score for each individual catcher. So I sought the outside help of a guy who's been around for a long time, Jerry Nairn. And he came to my home here in Nashville, Tennessee, and we worked for a little bit. And the one thing that we talked about consistently was that it wasn't my hands or my abilities that was holding me back. It was my setup. And so from day one, I was able to kind of readjust my setup. And if you go look back and look at film from pre-2020 to 2020, you can see a major difference in how I set up from a glove angle to how high my glove is in the strike zone.
Thanks.
Your next question is from Tony DeComo from MLB.com.
Hey, James, congratulations. I think with free agents, there's always a bit of uncertainty when in the offseason guys are willing to sign. What made this the right time and obviously the right team for you to do it when you did it?
Well, I think one thing for me personally was really just the direction that the New York Mets are headed in. From the moment that we heard from the Mets this offseason, it was definitely a team that was high on the list just because of the guys that they already have in the clubhouse, but also just the addition of the new owner, Sandy, Jared, all the above, everything is just trending in the right direction. So that made the New York Mets obviously a very attractive landing spot. And then just the conversations that were had through the course of the offseason leading up to the signing, it really just kind of pushed it over the edge and made it I say an easy decision. My prayer the whole time, I grew up in Santa Barbara, California, and I ended up at the University of Arkansas for college. As an 18-year-old, I couldn't have told you why that happened, but it did because I didn't have words for the reason, and it was just kind of one of those things where God took me there, and that was my prayer that this entire offseason, that my decision would be easy and that God would show me where I was supposed to be, and he made that decision easy for me.
You and Sandy have both mentioned your conversations. I guess it was on Zoom. And so I guess this question is for either of you, but what specifically was that conversation like that stood out to you both?
Well, I'll go ahead and answer. I had the opportunity to meet with both Sandy and the coaching staff, and really from the get-go, things just kind of jived as far as how they want to operate in the clubhouse and how I view my role with the team. And it was, like I said, it became a simple decision that this is where I wanted to be.
Thank you.
From my standpoint, Anthony, it was a great conversation. It came toward the end of the process, the negotiating process. And what struck me was how our side and James sort of had already made an assumption that this was going to happen. And so it wasn't really a selling job as much as it was just providing information and I think comfort to James about, what we had to offer. And as he mentioned, we had a number of coaches on the call. We had the head of our performance staff on the call. So we wanted to paint as complete a picture as we could of the New York Mets, notwithstanding what was going on with negotiations.
Next question is from Justin Toscano from the Bergen Record.
Hey, James, congratulations. You talked about the relationships with pitchers. Obviously, there's a difference between getting to know somebody and knowing what makes them tick. How have you been able to kind of get to that deeper level of knowing what makes them tick throughout your career?
Well, the first part is just getting to know somebody. In the baseball world, it's easy to know somebody at the field. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer to get to know somebody off the field, and you want to know what's going on at home, what's going on with their family, all the above. But the what makes somebody tick, honestly, the easiest way to figure that out is going through game-like experiences, finding out what happens when there's runners on second and third and 2 outs in a 1-run ball game. How does someone react to a certain situation? And that comes from experience. I over the course of my career, dealing with several future Hall of Fame pitchers to dealing with rookies. What makes guys tick, and it's just kind of one of those things that for me personally, I take a lot of pride in figuring that out and helping guys reach the level of their potential.
And for being non-tendered after Detroit till now, how would you describe what the past 2 years have been like for you?
Oh man, I've said this. I don't know if I ever even said it publicly, but it was something for me that it was tough. I mean, you never want to be told, "Hey, you're not wanted here." You're effectively, that's what a non-tender is that for whatever reason we're not going to re-up your contract. But it was the best thing that could have happened for my career. It's things happen for a reason, and I'm a big believer in that. And as hard as it was to go through that and the whirlwind of the last 24 months, I can look back now and say that things happened exactly the way they were supposed to, and it's made me the player that I am today.
Next question comes from Disha Thozar from the New York Daily News.
Hey, James, congrats. I guess just first of all, how many teams were on your final list of teams that you were choosing against?
I'm going to kind of stay away from the negotiating process. But the Mets, from day one were high on the list, and they stayed there until they were number one. And that was the final decision. I couldn't be happier to be with the Mets, and that'll be my focus moving forward.
Gotcha. And then just how much of the narrative did you pay attention to between you and JT Realmuto, just in terms of the competition, that sense between you two? And did you ever feel like that was getting in the way of you potentially signing with the Mets?
Honestly, I've had the opportunity to play against JT since we were in the minor leagues. We played against each other, in the fall league. And I've always been a fan of his from afar. But I've also always been comfortable with who I am. And I knew that things would work out the way they were supposed to. And, it never really bothered me one way or the other. What he was doing or working on, and I wish nothing but the best for him.
Your next question comes from Tim Healy from Newsday.
First question for Sandy, and then I have a follow-up for James. Sandy, when you look at the improvements James has made as a hitter, as a defender the last couple of years, what do you see that gives you confidence that he can continue to perform at that level, given the relatively small track record of that success?
Well, I think that, what James said earlier about the non-tender being, the best thing that could have happened to his career. My sense of James is that he took that as an experience and a starting point for turning his career around. James is not the only person in recent years to have endured that situation. I was in Oakland last year with Liam Hendriks. Hendriks was, in a similar situation. He was outrighted, I believe, a couple of years ago. But I think that what we have confidence in is James' work ethic, and not only his work ethic but his self-awareness. And I think those are the two things that probably benefited from his non-tender a couple of years ago. I think James is attuned to what he needs to do to improve. I think the episode with pitch framing is a perfect example. I think what we're most confident is that, James, to the extent that things go well, will handle it with a certain amount of, balance. And if things go poorly, he'll be motivated to get better. So I think we've seen that over the last couple of years. I think we're confident that will continue, in part because I don't think it's serendipitous, if you will. I think it's more a function of his work ethic and, as I said, his awareness of what he needs to do to get better.
Gotcha. And then for James, this offseason, are you continuing to work with Jared Narron or doing anything else in particular to continue that growth?
Yeah, no, he won't be coming to visit just with COVID and all the challenges that presents. But he's someone that I've kept in touch with. I kept in touch with him throughout the season last year, even when he was the bench coach for the Red Sox. We would be in communication, and he's someone that I plan on staying in contact with the rest of my career. And I mean, he's always watching. That's one thing I know. He would. I'd get back to my phone after a game, and I'd already have a text message from him. So I know that he's always following me, and that relationship that we built, he'll be someone that I constantly am in contact with.
Dan Martin from the New York Post is next.
James, you talked about the importance of relationships with pitchers. How well do you know the Mets pitching staff, and have you gotten a chance to reach out to any of them since you signed?
So I know I've said this already before to other people. There's several pitchers on the staff that I'm excited to be able to catch and not have to face anymore. But I'm definitely looking forward to getting to know these guys. I was waiting for everything to become official before I reached out and started that process. But one of the things that I'll be doing, especially once we get through the holidays, but here in the next few weeks is going over film and watching where guys have success, where maybe they don't have success, and then and being in contact with them and just kind of getting to know them. And as far as the stuff that I see on film, that's probably something that's going to be more spring training type stuff. But I do want to make sure I get to know guys before we get to spring training. That way we can, we were already, off and running before day one of spring training. But I also actually I already trained with a couple of guys, Steven Matz and Brad Brock. So I've actually been catching their bullpens for the last 2 or 3 off seasons. So they're guys that I already have a pretty good relationship with.
Your next question comes from Bruce Beck from WNBC.
James, congratulations. What about the challenge of playing in New York? Is that something you welcome? And if so, why do you think you will thrive here?
I definitely welcome it. There's no bigger stage than New York. And that's something that I'm very excited about. And, my thought process regarding the challenges of playing on that type of underneath in that type of spotlight is there's nobody in the world that has higher expectations for me than I do for myself. And that's kind of how I've always been. I feel like that's part of the reason why I was able to come out of the non-tender and perform the way I was following that. There's just no one that's going to ever outwork me. There's no one that can say anything to me that I'm not going to be harder on myself. I mean, it's just the way that I've been since I was a kid, and how I've always operated is that my expectations for myself are so high that there's nothing that can change, that type of mindset.
What do you think of Citi Field?
It's funny. There's like 2 stadiums that I've never played in as a big leaguer, and Citi Field is one of them. However, I have played there. I played there in the 2013 Futures game, and I loved every second of being in New York. I loved the stadium. I loved the atmosphere. So I'm very excited to be able to play there as a big leaguer versus the Futures game.
The next question comes from Dave Lennon from Newsday.
Hey, James, welcome to New York. You touched on this a little earlier, but just when you're making a decision as a free agent, obviously, we make a big deal about the money part of it, which is huge. You have that choice. But was there something about the presentation that the Mets made to you as far as the commitment from Sandy about putting together a championship team? I noticed that somebody had mentioned that you were friends with Jeff McNeil. Had Jeff spoken to you at all about the character of the clubhouse? Just a little bit more of the kind of behind the scenes idea you had of what the Mets were like.
Yeah, so I even though we played the same Little League, I have not spoken to Jeff yet. I plan on doing that. But being that I trained with Steven Matz and Brad Brock, I knew about the clubhouse long before I was even a free agent. I knew about the quality of people that were there. Steven and I are pretty close, and we communicate throughout the season. So I knew, all about, just the coaching staff and everything long before, free agency was even on my mind. So when the Mets came calling, it was like I said, from the first minute they were high on the list, especially with just kind of the new owner and everything that he's doing to, I've seen what he's, come out and said in the media. I've seen what he does on social media. I've seen the excitement from current players, particularly Marcus Stroman, with just how everything is just being sold for the New York Mets. And so that was, I didn't really need any selling from the standpoint of, are we trying to put a winner on the field or how are we trying to compete? I knew that was a focus for the organization, and I knew that was something I wanted to be a part of.
And just for Sandy and Jared, quick, how much is that a part of it? Obviously, the resources that you guys have for free agency is big, but the message you're trying to convey to these guys and how close you can get to becoming a championship. How much does that have to be the push in the way you have discussions with these guys going forward?
Well, I'll take the first stab at that. I don't think we have to sell our future. I think that as James pointed out, and as I said earlier, our conversation was not an effort really to sell James on the organization. It was to provide more information, in more detail than one could gather from the media or social media. But I think that, the excitement surrounding the Mets right now is self-evident. And we don't really have to spin that. We don't have to add to it. We don't have to, reach to hyperbole. People know who we are now, where we're going. And so as a result, I think that, that part of the conversation disappears and we get to talk more about, nuts and bolts. For example, a large part of our presentation had to do with our performance staff, Jim Cavallini and the group that he's put together that's, tasked with keeping our players healthy and on the field and at peak performance levels. So those are the kinds of things that we're trying to convey at this point, not the general, appreciation for where the Mets are going, but also to, add some reality to the perception.
Next question comes from Jake Steiner from the Associated Press.
Thanks, Ethan. Hey, James. Just wanted to follow up on talking about the importance of getting to know the pitchers off the field and also even the coaching staff. You're likely to go into spring training still operating under some of these COVID protocols, might make some of those off-field interactions a little bit different. Do you have ideas on ways to get to know guys? Does it make it more important to get to know guys kind of going into camp, not just the pitchers, but also the staff? And for Sandy and Jared too, curious if there's any thoughts on how to facilitate that a little bit for a guy that's coming in new to the organization.
Yeah, I think the onus is really on me here over the next month plus to get to know guys. We live in 2020 when everybody's on their phone nonstop. So a text message conversation here and there, a phone call, whatever it takes to really just start that ball rolling. And one of the things I guess I haven't mentioned up to this point is one of the things that I try and get across to the pitchers is I'm very easygoing. a lot of times in my career, I've been around other catchers that want things done, this way for every pitcher. And something that I think is a strength of mine is I'm not going to be cookie cutter like that with every single individual. You want me to set up a different way, I'm going to do everything I can to set up in a way that makes you happy. You want me to call a game differently, then we're going to sit down, we're going to talk, and we're going to figure out what is the best way for you to have success. I'm never offended by a pitcher that wants me to change and do something that he says is going to make him have more success. Because at the end of the day, my goal is to win. And if that's going to make him more comfortable, then that's what I'm going to do. So from that standpoint, getting to know somebody now and letting them know that's how I operate is you tell me what you need me to do to have success, and I'm going to find everything or do everything in my power to be able to do that.
Next question comes from Bradford Davis from the New York Daily News.
Hi, James. One of the things that I've long heard about you before, the framing improvement was that you were highly regarded as a game caller. So I guess this kind of builds off the last question, but can you share a little, about your, I guess, approach to game calling and how you think you can, help the Mets in that regard, from that side of, I guess, catcher defense?
Absolutely. So the way I'll start that answer is the game has become so number-based and so heavy focus on analytics and metrics. I think that's very important. I think that, there's so many numbers that can almost paralyze you. You have to be able to sift through the numbers and figure out what is most important, whether it's most important for the team that you're facing or most important for the guy that's on the mound for you that day, whatever that may be. But the way that I look at numbers, the way that I look at the metrics is that's my foundation. So going into a game, going into a series, I know all those numbers. I'm not a huge fan of the wrist guards that you see a lot of catchers wearing in today's game. I have one, and I started using one in 2020, but I almost never looked at it. And the reason why is because the way that I operate is I want to know all that information in my head. I don't want to have to look at a piece of paper and become a robot of, okay, let's see what the numbers say. I want the numbers to be my foundation, and then I want to trust my eyes in the game. And what I mean by that is the perfect example, and I remember I told Sandy and the coaching staff this example, was I remember a game, I believe it was against the Detroit Tigers. It was later in the game. Lucas Giolito was pitching, and he was at getting close to his pitch count for the day. And I knew we had to make quick work of the lineup. I called 9 changeups in a row. And I know that there's no metric anywhere in the game of baseball that would say that throwing 9 changeups in a row is a good idea. He had a 10-pitch inning, and he got out of the inning and completed the inning. And that was just an example of one of the situations where I knew what the numbers were saying, but I also knew what my eyes were telling me, and I was going to trust my eyes until they proved my eyes wrong. And like I said, we had a 10-pitch inning after throwing 9 straight changeups. So really the easy answer is having that foundation, that knowledge of the numbers, but trusting what your eyes are telling you and what the other team is telling you, also what your own pitcher is telling you.
Awesome. And I guess a question for Sandy, just about the upcoming season, but I know that video work is something that, video rooms are something that are very popular now, especially in game. And, of course, with COVID and the protocols around that, there were, that was, gone, in game. I'm curious if you have any clarity as to, when that might be reintroduced, in the 2021 season.
Yeah, I think that's difficult to know. There's a lot of uncertainty still surrounding 2021. We're all working on the assumption that the season will start on time, but it's possible that it won't. And so I think all of the protocols surrounding the 2020 season, we have to assume perhaps to some extent, particularly early in the season, may still be in place. And so, I think to the extent that, last year started to wean players off of, in-game video, between innings type video, it's probably a good thing. But as James emphasized, most of the work with respect to analytics and videos and so forth is done before the game starts. And I think that, what we were impressed by was the sense of preparation that James brings to his position. He talks about numbers being the foundation. And I think that's the key, is you try to do as well as you can. It's like going into an exam. You study hard and then you go take it. You don't have notes, you don't have reference material, you go take it. And I think that's how James approaches it. But what we have confidence in is the foundational part, the preparation.
Ed Coleman from WFAN and Mets Radio is next.
Hey, James, welcome to New York. Congratulations. You've talked a lot about your defense and how important that is, but your offense also improved as well, in particular your hard hit, your hard contact rate. Was there something that went into that process that made it better for you?
Yeah, the easy answer is I became content with who James McCann was. Going in depth, what that means is following my non-tender in 2018, I spent the first two and a half plus months of the offseason watching film and just trying to figure out a game plan of how I was going to attack the changes that I knew I needed to make. And the thing that I kept going back to was that as much of a blessing as it was and such a great opportunity to come up playing with guys like Miguel Cabrera and JD Martinez and Victor Martinez and Cespedes and Ian Kinsler, and watching these guys hit and watching them go about their work, I found myself trying to imitate them and trying to do the things that they did. And that offseason, I realized that I had to be content with who James McCann was, that I'm not Miguel Cabrera, I'm not JD Martinez, I'm not Ian Kinsler, and I can't mix all their things and become just a future Hall of Fame hitter doing everything that they do, because that's just too much. So what I did is I actually went back to who I was when I first got to the big leagues. I opened up my stance. I got more down into my legs. I moved my hands back closer to the launcher position, a little bit lower. And I just became a little bit more relaxed in my setup. And my approach, I became content taking a single the other way, taking a line drive through a 3-4 hole and being content that a hard hit single the other way is a good thing. And over the course of 2019, those line drive singles turned into line drive doubles, which turned into home runs. And the thought process is staying simple and being content with taking what's given to me, and being content that James McCann is good enough that I don't need to be Miguel Cabrera. I don't need to be JD Martinez. And so that's really kind of how that transformation occurred.
Thank you.
We have time for a couple more. Tony DeComo from MLB.com.
Hey, this question's for Sandy and Jared. Sandy, you had mentioned earlier this offseason that just given the nature of the organization's farm system, your budget, you were more likely to fill needs this winter through free agency, as you've done so far. Now that you've kind of gotten into the market a little bit and seen what it looks like, is that still the case, or could you see yourselves making potentially a blockbuster trade at some point this winter?
Well, I think the focus is still on free agency. There's still a lot of good players out there that don't require prospects in return. On the other hand, there are some interesting players on the trade market too. And so I think what we have to do at this point is make sure that we're actively engaged in both areas and evaluating, the opportunities that exist in both. We don't want to give up prospects, and we're going to be very careful about doing that. On the other hand, there may be something out there that causes us to say, okay, with respect to this particular deal, this makes sense to us. And while we don't want to give up prospects, maybe there's a way we can do this. So I think we're going to be actively engaged in both areas, while still focusing on the fact that, free agency, yes, requires dollar commitment, but it doesn't require giving up prospects.
Just as a maybe thinly veiled follow-up to that, how satisfied are you with your third base situation as it stands today?
Well, our third base, if you're talking about defensively, our third base situation is probably a little bit up in the air. we have JD Davis over there. We've got Jimenez who can play there. So we have some options. Is it as glaring a need as like a third or fourth starter? I don't think so. But look, we're going to look for targets of opportunity. And if there are ways to make our team better in areas where we're not the weakest, but could use an upgrade, then those are things that, Jared and the organization will have to consider.
Final question comes from Ed Randall from WFAN.
Best wishes, James, and welcome to New York. Hope you and your family are well. I just wanted to ask you, are you concerned at all about switching leagues? And again, knowing that it was a much bigger deal years ago when there wasn't interleague play, but is there any concern at all?
I wouldn't say there's any concern. I think I've mentioned this to a couple of people that I think my homework pre-game and pre-series might increase a little bit early on, just because I don't have the same experience. I mean, I've spent my entire career in the AL Central, so I know some of those hitters inside and out. I've had numerous at bats and numerous battles with a lot of those hitters, so I kind of know them like the back of my hand. So that'll be the only difference is early on, there'll be a little bit more homework associated with my preparation and getting to know other lineups, getting to know other players that, maybe I've only seen, once a year for the last, 5 years or whatever it may be. But other than that, no, I think it's, baseball is baseball. You still have to throw the ball over the plate and you still have to hit it, so I think at the end of the day, I think that it's not too big of a concern.
Thanks so much.
James, Sandy, and Jared, thank you very much for your time this afternoon. Everyone stay safe and happy holidays.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ian. All righty. Bye-bye, everybody.